Pam Bondi didn't expect this. In a Senate hearing meant to be routine, Senator Mazie Hirono cut straight to the heart of the matter and left the Attorney General squirming. On February 21st, the Department of Veterans Affairs boasted about saving millions by firing staff and cutting programs. But when Hirono asked a simple question, how much money did you actually save? The answers began to unravel. First, the secretary dodged, saying he'd get back with the number. Then under pressure, he blurted out $14 million. But where did it go? Which programs were cut? Which contracts were terminated? How many veterans were impacted?
Why don't we get to some facts? You were asked how many VA personnel have been let go, and you said 1,000, but this committee had been given information that there were some 2,400 who have been let go, and then you're trying to get back to 2019 numbers, which would be another 70 to 80,000. So what happened to the other 1,000 or so that we have been told have been released by the VA?
Following the court order, they're back employed.
I'm sorry?
Following the court order, they are back employed.
Okay, so in other words, when you fired all these people or let them go, that you didn't follow appropriate procedures, and therefore you had to hire them back. That's not what I consider a process that is going to determine whether or not people are
I disagree with that
doing their
premise.
jobs.
We had one judge in one area do this. This court is still being litigated, so as you well know, the
We have
litigation
actually
portion-
had in other departments where they have fired people, and other judges that have said you have to follow an actual procedure. So getting back to some factual information, in February 21, you claim that the VA has saved millions of dollars by firing staff. How much have you saved? You said millions. What's the amount?
Those millions in the round amount I'd have to get back, especially now with those who've come back, there's probably a different number that I'd have to get back with you on.
Aren't you prepared to give us that information, knowing that you are testifying, knowing that you will probably be asked for factual information such as this? So you don't know, even if you said in February that you saved millions of dollars by firing staff. And then you said,
Well, let me
excuse
re-clarify
me,
there.
let me
We
finish
did-
my question,
Well, we did
please.
say 14 million when we did away with our DEI.
you say $14 million.
DEI.
Okay,
the-
so then my next question is, where is all that money going? I have a series of questions relating to your comments on February 21st. So you said millions of dollars, now you're testifying. First you said you would have to get back to me, but now you're saying 14 million. Also, by cutting unnecessary programs, can you tell me what unnecessary programs specifically you have cut? And then you've redirected those savings, some 14 million, you say today, to veterans. And I would like to know specifically where these monies were redirected. Do you have that information
The
today?
number that I gave you just now on the DEI was the 14 million. Those have been directed to those with disabilities and prosthetics. We've also had a part of that millions was also contracts that were either terminated or renegotiated that we were in the
I think
process
you need
of
to
doing
tell
as well.
us exactly what contracts have been terminated, because that's what that's the thing about a contract. You know, when you terminate it, you have to have a reason for that. Otherwise, you end up having to pay.
Senator,
So,
also in the contracts, you also have
specifically-
to, when you're going through contracts and renegotiation, you also have to make sure that you're doing it properly. We're going to give you all the information you need when those are actually finished.
I would hope that you would have had all that specific information today. You have about 500,000 employees at the VA?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
Does
you.
that sound right? You have 500,000 employees at the VA?
No, we do not.
What is some number of?
About 470.
Okay, that's getting pretty close to 500,000.
Yeah,
So,
it's a little high.
in what categories are they employed? I mean, for example, how many nurses, how many doctors? Do you have this 470,000 employees broken down by categories of jobs?
Well, that is part of our problem, Senator, and I laid that out in my opening statement, and also in my conversation with.
But you don't know.
No, and
You don't have that.
let me say
You
something.
don't have that information.
Let me say something. Yes, we have over 300,000, probably closer to 400,000 position titles. But you know what the problem is?
Thank you. That
Before
would
I
help.
ever got there, we couldn't even find some of these when our HR people started to look at. So we took what we
Okay,
had at that point.
Let me proceed.
Well, I just want you, if you want a direct answer, then I'm giving you a direct answer.
You have a lot of people who are working for you. I would like to know, because there are questions about
Well,
who
and I'm
are you
trying to answer your
actually
question.
going to let go when you get to the 2019 numbers that is your goal. So you were asked some questions about the clinical trials. That's very important to provide healthcare services to our veterans when they are enrolled in clinical trials. Do you know how many clinical trials are on pause? And do you know how many veterans are in clinical trials?
I'd have to get that number back to you.
Is it 10? Is it more than, are we talking about 1,000 clinical
No,
trials?
we're not
When you
talking
put,
about, but again, here's the question.
Can you give me a ballpark
I will
figure on?
No, I'm not going to ballpark because it'll be
Okay,
used
so you
against me
don't
next
know.
time I'm
You don't
here.
know how many people that you have put on pause so that they are not getting the healthcare services that they need, because that's what a clinical trial is. You are getting medication, you are seeing doctors, you put these trials on pause. You cannot tell me how many veterans are now being paused in their clinical trials. You cannot tell me how many veterans are in and enrolled in clinical trials. You also cannot tell me how many clinical trials impact some, well, you have over 9 million veterans that you are taking care of. Clinical trials are very important, and you said so yourself. Mr. Chairman, I have other questions. You know, it's very clear that our secretary has not come with much in the way of numbers, and I really don't know how he's going to go about getting to 2019 figures for cutting employees, and he can't tell us what the categories of employees are, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're going to need to hear from Mr. Secretary again. Mr. Secretary, would you commit to coming back to this committee to provide us the kind of information we are asking for and to respond to questions?
I will get you the information that you asked for, which is
Will
what we've
you,
been doing.
will you come back to testify, or is this it for us with you,
I will
Mr.
get you the information
Secretary?
that you're looking for, Senator.
Mr. Chairman, we're not getting any commitment from the Secretary that he will come back to this committee to provide us the responses to our questions. Thank you.
Senator
That says a
Tillis.
lot.
Good morning, Secretary.
Good morning.
How are you doing? I guess it may
Having
be
a ball.
afternoon.
Silence, shrugs, promises to follow up later. For veterans whose clinical trials are paused, whose prosthetics depend on funding, those missing millions aren't just numbers, they're life or death. And what Hirono exposed wasn't just sloppy bookkeeping, it was a betrayal of trust every taxpayer should be furious about. When the VA secretary claimed that firing staff and cutting unnecessary programs saved millions of taxpayer dollars, it sounded like progress. The problem? No one could ever pin down the number. In February, the department proudly announced those savings, but when pressed by Senator Mazie Hirono, the figure suddenly shifted. At first, the secretary hedged, saying he would have to get back with the amount. Only after relentless questioning did he settle on a number, $14 million. But the moment he said it, the real questions began. Where did those millions actually go? Were they reinvested into veteran health care, redirected toward prosthetics or mental health, used to fund clinical trials that so many depend on? The secretary couldn't give a clear answer. Instead, the money seemed to vanish into vague promises about contracts being renegotiated or terminated. To the average taxpayer, this doesn't just look sloppy, it looks like a shell game. Say one thing to the cameras, then fumble under oath. And here's the worst part, those dollars aren't abstract. They represent treatment, medication, and survival for millions of veterans who earned their care in blood and sacrifice. And yet the VA couldn't explain where they went. One of the VA's proudest claims was that it saved money by cutting staff. But here's what they don't tell you. Many of those firings didn't hold up in court. Lawsuits from employees who were improperly terminated forced the agency to rehire. It had already let go. Think about that. The VA fires staff, brags about millions saved, then quietly brings them back after legal battles, wiping out the supposed savings and leaving veterans caught in the middle of bureaucratic chaos. Senator Hirono's questioning exposed this contradiction. If the goal was efficiency, how does firing nurses, doctors, or administrators, only to rehire them later, accomplish anything except disruption? Meanwhile, the VA continued to boast about cutting unnecessary jobs, even though many of those positions were vital to patient care. For veterans relying on timely appointments, critical procedures, and ongoing support, the damage was already done. Savings turned into lawsuits, efficiency turned into confusion, and the only constant was uncertainty for the very people the agency is supposed to protect. What looked like cost-cutting on paper revealed itself as reckless mismanagement in reality, and once again it's veterans who pay the price for leadership's mistakes. When Senator Hirono pressed further, another shocking detail came out. The VA has roughly 470,000 employees, nearly 500,000 people. Yet when asked for a breakdown, the secretary admitted he didn't even have the numbers. How many doctors, how many nurses, how many mental health specialists serving veterans in crisis? No clear answer. Instead, he spoke vaguely about hundreds of thousands of position titles scattered across the agency, some so outdated that HR staff couldn't even find them in their system. Let that sink in. The second largest federal agency, with a workforce the size of a small city, can't say who does what. For veterans, this isn't just a statistic. It means when they walk into a VA hospital, there's no guarantee staff shortages won't delay their care. It means leadership doesn't know if the right people are in the right places to serve 9 million veterans nationwide. And for taxpayers, it means billions are funding a system that can't even produce a simple roster. If leadership can't tell Congress who they employ, how can they be trusted to manage budgets, staff, or life and death services? That's not efficiency, that's chaos disguised as management. The most disturbing moment came when the discussion turned to clinical trials. These aren't abstract research projects, they're veterans with cancer testing new treatments, veterans with PTSD trying experimental therapies, veterans hoping for medications that could change or even save their lives. Yet when Senator Hirono asked the secretary how many clinical trials were paused, he couldn't give an answer. Not even a ballpark figure. Was it 10, 100, 1,000 veterans affected? He refused to say. That silence spoke volumes. Pausing clinical trials doesn't just stall paperwork, it interrupts care. It means veterans enrolled in life-changing studies suddenly find themselves without treatment, without clarity, and without hope. Imagine being told the drug trial you've relied on for months is on hold, and the person in charge can't even tell Congress how many lives are in limbo. That's not oversight, that's reckless negligence. Clinical trials represent some of the most advanced care available through the VA system, often the only option for veterans with rare or aggressive conditions. To pause them without tracking the damage is unacceptable. And the fact that leadership couldn't even quantify the harm reveals a system crumbling under its own weight. When pressed about where the so-called $14 million in savings came from, the secretary pointed to unnecessary programs and contract renegotiations. But when lawmakers asked for specifics, which programs, which contracts, the details vanished into thin air. One example floated was cutting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, a move that plays well in soundbites but does little to address the real challenges facing veterans. Another claim was canceling or renegotiating contracts, yet no list of vendors, no dollar amounts, and no documentation were provided. It felt less like fiscal discipline and more like a shell game. Shuffle numbers, boast about savings, then hide the receipts. For taxpayers, this is infuriating. For veterans, it's devastating. Every dollar supposedly saved should translate into stronger care, shorter wait times, and better access to services. Instead, what Congress heard was vague promises and half-answers, savings on paper, suffering in practice. By calling it efficiency, the VA tries to frame cuts as progress. But when you dig deeper, it looks like a strategy to mask budget holes and shift blame, leaving veterans without answers and without the resources they desperately need. And that's a story America has heard before. If this all sounds familiar, that's because it is. The VA has a long history of scandals that reveal the same pattern: big promises, flashy numbers, and veterans left behind. In 2014, the nation was outraged to learn that veterans were dying while waiting months for basic appointments. Leaders at the time claimed reforms were underway. Years later, reports surfaced of understaffed hospitals, ballooning wait times, and funds being mismanaged. And now, the cycle repeats. The secretary boasts about millions saved, but under questioning, can't provide receipts. Clinical trials paused, staff fired illegally, contracts terminated without explanation, all while more than 9 million veterans depend on this system for survival. Politicians love to wrap themselves in the slogan "support the troops," but when it comes time to fund their care, the cuts always come first. The reality is that every time the VA fails to manage its resources, veterans pay with delayed surgeries, canceled treatments, and mental health programs put on hold. It's not just inefficiency, it's betrayal. Veterans kept their promise to serve this country. The VA's repeated failures show how often America breaks its promise in return, and that's the bitter truth Congress keeps exposing. When you strip away the talking points, one question remains: where's the money really going? If the VA proudly claims $14 million in savings, why can't it trace those funds? Why can't it show which programs were cut, which contracts were canceled, and which veterans actually benefited? The uncomfortable truth is that those answers don't exist, at least not in a form the public can see. And that raises a bigger concern. If leaders can't account for millions, how do we trust them to manage billions? The VA's budget is enormous, second only to the Department of Defense. Each year, hundreds of billions flow through its hospitals, clinics, research facilities and programs. Yet Congress can't even get a straight answer about basic line items. Meanwhile, veterans are left wondering why their prosthetic appointments are delayed, why their cancer treatments are paused, and why mental health resources are stretched so thin. Lawmakers cut waste with one hand while approving massive subsidies for defense contractors and tax breaks for the wealthy with the other. It's a brutal irony: the people who sacrificed the most are the ones shortchanged, while those with power and influence keep cashing in. At the end of the day, this isn't about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about people. Veterans aren't asking for favors, they're asking for the care they were promised, the care they earned through sacrifice. When the VA hides behind vague answers and shifting figures, it's not just bad management, it's a broken promise. And broken promises have real consequences: clinical trials paused, life-saving treatments delayed, and families left in limbo. That's why hearings like this matter. They strip away the polished press releases and force officials to answer hard questions, but it can't stop with Congress. Every taxpayer has a stake in this. If leaders can't explain where millions go, how can we trust them with billions? Transparency isn't optional, it's an obligation. Veterans deserve better than budget gimmicks and political spin. They deserve clarity, accountability, and unwavering commitment, and that responsibility falls on all of us. So here's the call to action: don't settle for slogans about supporting the troops. Demand receipts, share the truth. Hold leaders accountable, because the moment we stop asking hard questions is the moment veterans are forgotten, and forgetting them isn't just unacceptable, it's un-American.